Now live. Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in today. This is Hannah from Lloyd's Asia's Market Development Team based here in Singapore. So very warm welcome back. This is the final week of our Academy's APMEA Emerging Risk Series 2025. And over the next 1 hour, grab your morning coffee or afternoon tea, and we'll be exploring the critical issues of cyber exposures in the energy sector. So just running through a quick disclaimer before we begin today's session. The views expressed here by our speakers are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of Lloyd's Corporation or service companies. This series is intended for educational as well as informational purposes only. Please remember nothing shared here constitutes as formal advice or is an official Lloyd's position. And each of these webinars that you join will qualify for 1 CPD hour. To receive your recognition for this, stay with us until the end, and we will ask that you complete a feedback form link later. Please also use the Q&A function to ask our speakers a lot of questions throughout this meeting. And today, let me introduce our speakers from Munich Re Specialty Global Market Syndicate Asia. We have Tom Rigo, Senior Cyber Underwriter, as well as Winnie Chiu, Cyber and FI's Underwriter. So now I'll hand the time over to Tom and Winnie for them to do their introductions, and then they'll kickstart their sharing. So over to you guys. Thank you.
Sure, I can start. Yeah, so Tom Rigo. I actually sit in the London office, but I've been at Munich Re for about 6 years underwriting cyber, and prior to that, I was underwriting energy on the property side for a large energy mutual. So I've sort of crossed over between the property damage and the traditional cyber space, which we can get into sort of in the end of the presentation. So I'll pass it over to Winnie.
Hi, my name is Winnie. I'm the Cyber and FI Underwriter at Munich Re Specialty. I work alongside with Tom Rigo, but I'm based in Singapore office. So shall we move on to the topic for today?
Let's do it.
Sure. So let's move on to operational technology. Operational technology here is like the hardware and the software to monitor, control, and manage industrial operations. They do play a crucial role in critical infrastructure management. So let's put it in a most simple manner to understand OT. OT runs the network that allows common civilized norms to continue. Let's say the electricity on your house or running clean water coming out of your faucet. So those are things that actually control. So here we're looking at this includes of oil and gas, electricity, utility grid, manufacturing operations, and etc. So this whole thing you see on the screen here, so it consists of ICS, DCS, and SCADA. I'll go into each and every one of them to provide a better understanding of them. First, we have industrial control system, which we call it ICS. So it is an umbrella term that includes both SCADA and DCS. So the ICS networks can monitor various infrastructure from a raw material system. So putting an example of having the conveyor belts running in a mining operations, power consumption in electricity grids, and also controls of your valves pressure in the natural gas facilities. So these networks are definitely very mission critical and expected to be running immediate and very high availability. So ICS actually protects the hardware and software that controls the OT. Next, we have SCADA, which also stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. It's a system architecture that for managing large and complex processes across large geographical area. So the main purpose of this is on data. SCADA collects all your data from your physical protection, network protection, endpoint protection, so every point of protection. They collect the data and then give you the position to make a very high level decision on what to do with it. And moving on to DCS, which is called the Distribution Control System, is a process that connects the controllers, the sensors, all the things that keep things running. So the data that collected from the SCADA, they all kind of interconnect all of it. So we're looking at the OT, ICS, SCADA, DCS. They all serve very distinct roles, but they all overlap each other to safeguard industrial operations and critical infrastructure.
Just to add to that, I mean,
Yeah.
put it simply, operational technology is where technology moves into the physical world, involving physical processes. So, Winnie, I'll let you continue on this slide.
Sure. This slide actually illustrates how OT works. Here, on your production environment. So they have a gap in between both of them to make sure that it's not as all that technological advancement, and also we started to have a bit more ease of controls of the items. So that's where we introduce remote access, and so then this whole network catch into here. So here you're having your IT system to actually access your OT environment to increase your visibility of your real time. So you can actually control what happens there.
So essentially, what's happened is the world has moved from being analog to digital, where a large number of processes that used to be manual are now being digitalized. And management essentially wants high visibility over what the production metrics are on your operational technology. Happy to have sensors, have readings that flow from what was previously the term potentially could be air gapped network into your IT or enterprise network. And the challenge there is the operational technology environment is extremely sensitive and poses its own unique challenges, which we'll get into. But sort of across the board, across industries, I know we're focusing on the energy sector today, but operational technology, would be involved in manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, all the way to any sort of critical national infrastructure, telco, et cetera. And a lot of that, the connectivity is increasing. We're starting to see SCADA systems move into the cloud, which is good from a business efficiency and allows management to make better informed decisions. But it does mean that you're increasing the potential for a bad actor to get into those systems because there's more connection points. And generally, the way that you can view the operational technology environment and your enterprise network is through sort of a layered structure. So what this diagram here shows is, there is this the green line there, which would be a firewall, or it's also called a DMZ, and that could be through a jump host, or you have a unidirectional gateway, which only allows information to flow one way, i.e., you can have readings from your operational technology environment pushed out into your IT environment, but there's only monitoring functionality in that. There's no control functionality where somebody in the IT environment can then jump to your production environment, which essentially is your critical operating systems and where the business makes money, keeps the lights on, et cetera. Oftentimes we'll see complete, separate domains for each individual section of the environment, so that you're not sharing IT credentials across both, where you might see a data dump onto a dark web and somebody accesses those credentials, and those could be valid for IT and OT. So segregation of duties and credentials is also a crucial factor here. Winnie, if you want to move to the next.
Sure.
So some of the challenges within the OT environment, I touched on them briefly, but when you're talking about the IT environment, it's enterprise, it's your intranet, your email, et cetera, where you have the ability to essentially fall over or fail over data centers, whereas the operational technology environment, because it's generally going to be segmented from your IT environment, and the processes involved might involve high temperature, high pressure. There is potential for bodily injury. Human life could be at risk at these large facilities. That in terms of shutting them down, it has to be a very sort of step-by-step process. And in addition, getting them back up and running. So the difference between sort of latency is extremely challenging. And as Winnie previously mentioned, these are business critical systems that we're talking about. So, customers expect, uptime of 99.999%, particularly when you're involved in critical national infrastructure. I've talked briefly about the rebooting and the production environment. We've seen cases where there's potentially been malware on operational technology. And the client or insured could be happy with getting their systems back up and running. But because this is critical national infrastructure, you might have a government regulator come on site and have to do their own due diligence before you're even allowed to begin production or get your systems back up and running again. Another challenge with it is patching. So within the IT environment, I mean, you have Patch Tuesday where it gets, pushed down, and you can, we'd expect critical patches to be 72 hours, potentially less. But in the operational technology environment, you can't push down patches because you have the potential to cause downtime, and the systems are extremely critical. And so patches have to be scheduled for when there is planned outage. So this could be around a maintenance schedule, and it's not going to be monthly, quarterly. Oftentimes it will be annually, and it's very likely that it will be somebody coming on site. The patches should be tested in a sandbox environment prior to being deployed. Installation of third-party software components. So these systems, when you're talking about, let's say, a large power plant station, you're going to have a number of different OEMs or original equipment manufacturers that might be operating on a single site with different hardware and different software. So these vendors will come on site and potentially use their own equipment, USB sticks or computers, to log onto your systems. And so making sure that those systems are clean of any malware prior to connecting to your system is extremely crucial. Oftentimes we will see remote access from OT vendors directly into the operational technology environment. There are challenges with that. I think everybody on the call is aware of supply chain risk and third-party vendor risk. You can protect your own systems, but oftentimes, your weak point could be a vendor who has connectivity to your environment. So extreme temperatures, vibrations, and shocks, as we've spoken about, operational technology is involved with processes that can cause fire, explosion, machinery breakdown risk, if the safety systems aren't adequately protected or exceed their parameters. And then in terms of operational technology for legacy systems, so if you're going to buy a kit, particularly if you look in the power gen or the oil and gas space, the investment is millions, tens of millions of dollars. And so that those systems that you're buying from the OEMs, the Siemens, the Honeywells, et cetera, they're built to last, and they're not necessarily built with security by design. So a system that's 25 years old isn't necessary or doesn't have the secure by design to deal with the cybersecurity threat actors that we're seeing in 2025. And so you have to find other ways of protecting those systems that might have inherent vulnerabilities. And in large part, that is due to segmentation of your systems, which we've spoken about. And it can go all the way down to micro segmentation. So not just between your IT and your OT or information technology sectors, but it could be each individual site is segmented by itself, or each individual system within your operational technology is segmented from one another, that you don't have a single choke point or single point of failure across your environment. And then obviously, segmented, protected from no access to the internet for obvious reasons. In terms of, and just to touch on the third-party software, another challenge is you can't overlay your traditional IT cybersecurity tools to your operational technology environment. So you can't just deploy, a CrowdStrike EDR solution to your operational technology environment, because you're essentially dealing with PLCs or programmable logic controllers that if they sense anything or there's anything that happens to them, they'll just shut down. And as we've mentioned, availability needs to be extremely high for a large part of these systems. And so, we're starting to see security companies come out with specific tooling around operation technology, but it's still sort of very early days, and has definitely lagged the corporate environment side from a cybersecurity tooling standpoint. Winnie, I'm not sure if you have anything to add.
No, I think you cover all aspects for that. But yeah, let's move on to be very industry specific now, because the topic today is on energy industries. So we will move on to the first industry that we have, renewable energy. Tom?
Sure. Yeah. So renewable energy, obviously there's sub-industries within there, wind, solar. We've got some battery energy storage systems there, BESS systems. You can maybe include hydro too, although that's oftentimes in the conventional power side of things. Yeah. So one of the challenges, you have a monopoly of manufacturers. So if you look across the globe in terms of who's manufacturing wind turbines, for market share, there's maybe 8 to 10 operators. It's Siemens, GE, Nordex, etc., which means that these companies will have a monopoly in terms of how they push cybersecurity and their view of cybersecurity down to their customer base. And we oftentimes get the comment, well, if it's a Siemens system or if it's a GE system, we're comfortable from a cyber security standpoint, and therefore, why do we want to transfer a risk? Well, we know whether it's, CrowdStrike having their misconfigured patch or Microsoft getting hacked, it doesn't matter the size or sophistication of the client. Everybody's vulnerable. And so that argument doesn't necessarily hold water. Real-time operations, so immediate impact on operations. Again, it's you're generating revenue or essentially power that you're selling to the grid or to a community, and that's minute by minute, and so downtime is simply unacceptable. Oftentimes, the way that renewable energy is set up is you'll have an asset owner, which might be, say, a private equity firm, and then the asset operator might be one of the OEMs or original equipment manufacturers, so Siemens, let's say. And so Siemens will handle all operations of that turbine or wind farm. And then they will, through an SLA, essentially provide the revenue, which guarantees we will have, say, 99.9% uptime, but we're in control of all maintenance, including cybersecurity, et cetera. So from the SLAs that I've read, which is the service level agreements between these private equity firms and the renewable energy companies, they are silent on cyber. So they will have exclusions for force majeure or, say, acts of God, i.e. if, a Cat 5 windstorm comes in and takes out the turbine, they're not liable. But for cybersecurity, they are silent on that, and that is not force majeure. There's a challenge for visibility and lack of controls. So again, if you're a company and you want to, say, have a different set of cybersecurity standards, you could then be in breach of your warranty with GE or Honeywell or Siemens, who's ever manufacturing, and then therefore, you say, I want X cybersecurity controls on it, and they say, well, then you're in breach of your warranty, and so you kind of lose control of your asset. Also, a lot of these operations are remotely controlled, and so from an access point, it's not somebody coming physically on site and scanning a badge or biometrics to get on the site. It's a remote operation which involves connectivity. So obviously challenges there, and that goes into sort of the modern technology. A notable example. So we had Nordex. Nordex is wind turbine manufacturer. They had a cybersecurity incident. It didn't actually jump down to the individual turbine level, but they issued a letter to all their clients about the cybersecurity event. And I think, what this shows is if somebody's able to get into, a Nordex and then jump to, if they were able to traverse to the remote operations center, then you can impact a large number of clients through a single point, which is again sort of the systemic nature that you can have from the monopoly around some of these, particularly on sort of the wind side.
Yeah, so this kind of put us in like once one single manufacturer gets hit, then it's pretty much easy access to all the others that uses the same manufacturer, same system, right, Tom?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Should
we move on to the
next
next
slide?
one? Yep.
Sure.
Power generation. Yeah.
So power gen, complexity of OT systems. So again, it's going to be a mixed match of hardware and software on these sites. And so, one of the major challenges in operational technology, and I think cybersecurity in general, is you can't protect what you don't know you have. And so you can't deploy scanning tools or asset inventories because generally they're not necessarily passive, and so they could interrupt systems. And so a large number of these asset inventories are literally on a spreadsheet or even pen and paper of we've got X version of X system, which means that if there's a 0-day that comes out, you might not even know if you're operating on that software or have that hardware on your systems. That goes into OT systems, obviously regulatory compliant. So in the US, they have what's called NERC-CIP, which is the regulatory government for electricity transmission, and they'll come through and actually come on site and assess your controls against a cybersecurity maturity framework. There's IEC 62443. We're starting to see a lot more cybersecurity frameworks dedicated to the operational technology environment come out, which is great, and it allows clients to benchmark themselves against best in class and to be able to measure their improvements year over year. And that then allows them to go up to their senior management, their board of directors, to say, we're currently at a 2.3 out of 5, but if we had budget to do X, Y, Z, we could move up to a 2.5, 3, whatever it may be. And it's this is what X dollars means from a measurable standpoint, which when you're dealing with people who don't necessarily have OT or IT focus day to day, allows you to budget or receive the budget from senior management. And we're also seeing, as I said, governments mandate a lot of these cybersecurity controls. In the US, we've seen, TSA Directive 2, which has fines and penalties attached. So if you don't, or if you have gaps in your controls that are found by them, they will fine you. We didn't speak about this before, but historically, operational technology has been managed on the engineering side, and it's been siloed away from information technology, which obviously poses some challenges. We're starting to see those two sort of blend together, where operational technology now sits with information technology because there is this connection through the two environments. And that's extremely positive to hear. And oftentimes when we get on calls with clients, they'll have the engineers or the individuals that are potentially at individual site level on the call alongside, the CISO or the CIO, which is positive, and it allows them to better manage their cyber risk and make
Yeah,
a
definitely.
better risk for our portfolio. Go ahead.
Coming from a point of view of people on the ground would definitely help us in underwriting the risk and get a better understanding of them. So a little bit more touch point on the regulatory compliances. Over here in Asia, we're also seeing like all the governments are starting to put in cybersecurity laws and restrictions, fines and penalties, all sorts. So it's not just on the other side, they're all coming over here. We're starting to see implementation of all these rules and regulations, which would make the cybersecurity of a company to take cybersecurity more seriously. Yeah.
Yep. It's inevitable, just as privacy regulations has sort of, spanned across the globe. Critical infrastructure, it's coming, and they will try to make an example out of companies that fall below their standards. So, I think next slide.
Moving on to the oil and gas industry. Yeah.
So oil and gas, similar to renewables, you have upstream, which is essentially pulling the product out of the ground, these platforms, the offshore platforms you can see here. Midstream, which is pipeline, so transporting, whether it's natural gas or oil. And then downstream, so downstream is refining the product, and includes marketing as well, so potentially gas stations. So each will have its own challenges. Similar to the power gen space, that could be that will span a large number of sort of OEMs or contractors that will be on site and touching one client systems. Lack of visibility and controls. So we are starting to see some specific vendors come out with OT monitoring solutions. So they are separate from their IT SOC. The companies like Dragos and Claire OT, which will have to be, they are specific for the operational technology that you can see sort of any anomalies that are interacting on the systems, and then report down or report up. Talent shortage. Shortage of skilled cybersecurity professionals with expertise in OT systems. Again, these tend to be sort of on the engineering side. Clients are requiring their employees to sign up for specific OT cybersecurity trainings, which are available, and certifications, etc., which is positive to see. The challenge of legacy systems as well. Again, these are built to last, and they're not necessarily secure by design. And then, similar to the power gen space, you have the regulatory and environmental compliance. And again, maybe less so in the renewable energy side, but there's individuals that are working on these sites, and you're dealing with high pressure, high temperature, and there's the potential for loss of life. And so it is absolutely critical that these systems are protected. A notable example, so Colonial Pipeline, it's a trunk line that essentially goes up the east coast of the U.S., and they had a sort of what I would call deemed run-of-the-mill ransomware attack, where the threat actor was able to get onto the corporate IT systems. They didn't actually jump across the OT system. But the reason why this is a good case study is, the previous school of thought was if we segregate our operational technology from our IT environment, then our IT environment could go down, but we're still able to run our revenue generating assets. In Colonial Pipeline's circumstance, it affected a system which allowed them visibility over whose product was coming through their pipeline. And because they lost visibility, they were forced to shut down their operational technology, or voluntarily shut down their operational technology environment, even though that the malware didn't jump to those systems. And so, what it showed was, or the questions that we need to be asking, or do you have any critical systems on your IT environment that if affected would impact your ability to continue operations on the revenue generating side, or your physical assets. And so those IT systems should be just as protected as you would your operational technology. And so after the Colonial Pipeline incident, we saw a lot more focus for clients around, okay, let's run incident response plan to disaster scenarios where if this system went down, on our IT infrastructure, how would that impact our OT? Would it impact our OT? You know, incident response plans that kind of spanned both, rather than saying, okay, you know, our cloud infrastructure has gone down, but you know, we're still generating revenue. And those incident response plans need to involve people in, you know, from top to bottom, from the actual sort of on the workstation engineering side on site, all the way up to sort of the PR, et cetera, C-suite levels as well. So I don't, Winnie, do you have anything to add there?
We have also seen examples that has a company that has actually implemented a clear separation between their OT and the IT system. So when the IT system got hit, their OT had no issue to continue operations, so they were not affected at all. Yeah. So now let's move on to cyber physical damage.
Sure. So historical context. So back in 2018, so the PRA, which is Prudential Regulatory Authority, which regulates all financial services within the UK, including Lloyd's, came out with a statement. Lloyd's came out with a statement that says you need to either affirmatively cover or exclude cyber within all lines of insurance. And so when posed with this, the property insurance market said, okay, well, you know, so sorry, just to step back. So property operates on an all risk basis, right? So if there's physical damage, it's covered unless it's excluded. And so the term silent cyber is essentially it's covered because we haven't explicitly said it's excluded, whereas cyber policies work on a you know, per peril basis, i.e. triggered through a malicious cyber act, let's say, or a data breach. So property underwriters, you know, they essentially had the decision to say, well, we're either going to affirmatively cover this, which Lloyd said you then need to underwrite around it, price it, aggregate for it, etc., or explicitly exclude it from all property insurance policies. Generally speaking, across the board, Lloyd's property markets have excluded malicious cyber risk from property insurance policies. So this left clients with a gap in exposure. So we started to see clients come to us or to our property colleagues and say, well, you've excluded it from your property insurance policy. Fine, we understand you're not underwriting around keeping a malicious actor out of our systems. But you know, is there a solution, or you know, how can we fill this gap in our property insurance policy? And so that's where cyber markets have stepped up, and you know, we've developed a solution to essentially fill that gap in exposure for the client, which is a malicious cyber attack that causes physical damage. So we've run through sort of, you know, how the how the OT and IT environment have started to be connected, and therefore the exposure there. So in terms of the actual exclusions being applied, Lloyd's have come out with a number of different exclusions that provide or exclude cover to varying degrees. So the first one is a JRC 2019-013. This is applied to the upstream energy sector, that offshore oil rig platform that was in the previous picture. And this uses language that says any computer malware essentially as a means of inflicting harm. So the malicious intent around that. And so clients are covered for any, say you have a human error or operator error on your computer systems, that would be covered. But if it's malicious code or unauthorized access, that would be excluded by the energy underwriters. The LMA 5400, so this is the most common exclusion that we've seen utilized by property underwriters. This provides cover for fire and explosion from a cyber incident, which is non-malicious. However, it excludes all resulting perils being fire, explosion, machinery breakdown, generally excluding the NatCat elements, from a cyber act. So cyber act is any malicious or as a means of inflicting harm. And we will, at Munich Re, will provide cover for physical damage from the Cyber Act trigger, not the cyber incident trigger. What this exclusion does, though, is it leaves the client with a gap in cover for a cyber incident, non-malicious, that causes machinery breakdown, which is when we come to the LMA 5426. So this is seen generally across the board on power accounts. Whenever I speak to clients or property brokers, I generally suggest this clause because this covers all perils resulting from a cyber incident that sits within the property insurance side, so non-malicious, and then excludes all cyber acts, the malicious side, which we can then wrap around and provide sort of cyber gap or buyback insurance against that cyber act malicious exclusion. The LMA 5401. So this is the most absolute exclusion. So it excludes both cyber incident, non-malicious, i.e. human error, operator, or system failure that cause physical damage, and the Cyber Act. And some legacy, I know this audience not necessarily US, so it's NMA 2914, 2915. You still sometimes see these used, and they will provide cover for named perils, which is normally fire and explosion, and then exclude or not name the peril of machinery breakdown, which is generally viewed as the most likely scenario when you're talking about cyber physical damage. And then just to sort of finish off, there are solutions out there for clients. So a number of Lloyd's markets, including ourselves, are trying to fill this gap. We believe that this is a cyber risk we're underwriting around your client's abilities to keep threat actors out, and it should be priced for and underwritten separately from the property policy. And we're actively looking to provide that insurance solution for clients. So there is availability in the market following the Silent Cyber initiative.
Right. And that probably brings us to the end of our presentation. So it's question time.
Okay, thank you so much, Winnie and Tom. So as always, our Q&A feature is open. So we always welcome any questions that the crowd may have. But before that, I will get the ball rolling and then ask some questions that I've prepared. So okay, let's move to the first question. So it was very interesting that you both explored key challenges as well as the various industries in the energy sector, and then they face cyber risk in their OT structures. So I think the first one is that given increasing integration of operational technology in critical energy infrastructure and some of the unique vulnerabilities that you both highlighted, what do you see is the kind of the key consideration when you are underwriting OT risk?
Winnie, do you want to start, or?
I think you can go ahead.
Sure. Well, it does need to be underwritten individually. So as we're starting to see, there is separate questions that need to be asked for OT. So if the client does have exposure to operational technology, there should be a full separate question set available because the answers will vary. And as we previously described, some of these companies, those answers might even vary by individual asset as well. So it's very challenging for clients to respond to binary yes or no when it may be applicable at one site or in one environment, but not the other. But I'd say it's crucial to ask specific OT questions. And again, those relate to, how are you protecting those systems from a segregation standpoint, from a visibility standpoint, from an asset inventory standpoint, from an access control standpoint. So.
Okay. Any additional comments, Winnie? Or if not, I can move to the next one.
No, I think Tom has pretty much covered everything. So basically, every time when we underwrite a risk, basically look along the lines of what kind of controls they have, what kind of segregation, which is the most important part.
Yeah. Do you guys feel that you kind of provide any specific, let's say, guidance or support when the insurer comes to you and they kind of there's a need to help them meet these policy conditions, right, so that they can improve their claims outcome? Yeah. So yeah, specific to the both of you in previous client cases. Yeah, are there any specific support or guidance you give?
For sure. I mean, so we work with a number of sort of third parties as well that, I've been on site to actual, refineries with third parties who will come in and assist in running against a framework, whether that's C2M2, NIST, et cetera, NERC, SIP. And, essentially we want to assist our clients on their journey, and it is a journey that you can't stand still, right? So we definitely offer additional services to improve their posture, but also highlight potential areas where we say, look, we're seriously concerned about this. And when we're on the phone with both the CISO and potentially the CFO or the risk manager, their ears perk up and say, oh, wow, if this is a concern for insurers, then, maybe the CISO or the head of OT had some challenges from a budgetary standpoint, and it just adds, credence to, okay, it's worth investing in X project or X initiative. So.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So, one thing that I'm curious about is whether the extension of property damage coverage for cyber events is something that you see is also common in other industries beyond energy.
For sure. As we mentioned, I mean, this is kind of an energy focused talk, but operational technology spans all industries. It's wherever computer systems move into the physical world. What I would say is what we've seen recently is, what I would call unintentional CZ. So if you have any sort of, let's say you have a warehouse that's filled with anything perishable, say it's bananas or milk or pharmaceuticals that need to be kept at a certain temperature. All those systems are running, whether it's temperature controlled, et cetera. If they vary by any degree, you could have potentially spoilage, which is a CZ. So it doesn't necessarily have to be CZ where the threat actor's gone in and is manipulating down to the PLC temperature, pressure level, shutting off safety instrument systems. It could be we've had ransomware that's spread across our systems and has shut down, or we've been forced to shut down in an uncontrolled way that's caused maybe machinery breakdown or spoilage. So.
Okay, Winnie, any thoughts?
I would say that the cyber environment now has actually evolved so quickly and so extensive that if any incident happened, it would have been a chain effect. So it's not just one person that gets affected. It would be, in this case, it's probably a critical mass infrastructure kind of situation that would cause outage to many people, and then there's many will be affected by one single incident.
Okay. I think another question that I have to ask is underrated.
So, Winnie, do you want to take this, or do you want to?
You can go ahead.
So, cyber policies typically define it as computer system. OT is a computer, it would be included within computer system. We are starting to see, operational technology involving SCADA, DCS, the components that Winnie previously mentioned. We are starting to see that being specifically written in. But our view is that if you're writing a cyber insurance policy for a client and you're defining it as insurance computer systems, that would include operational technology.
Okay. I think that's very good to know and be helpful for, any of the audience in the crowd.
Yep.
Maybe one more question I can think of is, just now you guys mentioned, doing risk assessment, vulnerability assessments, or even site kind of surveying is very important. So from, the clients that you work with, are there any best practices or recommendations that, you've seen from various cases that would be good to kind of have, these kinds of regular assessments, right? So what do you think? Are there any, is there like a recommended frequency, or should it be, is a yearly check, too long or a delay, or should it be even more frequent?
Yeah, so generally the way that we've done them is we'll, if it's a large client with a large number of assets, that could be global or it could be localized, we'll pick off each individual site by criticality. So we'll start at their most critical site, do a cybersecurity sort of audit, and then sort of work our way down from a criticality standpoint. Generally the way that we see it is that there will be policies and standards that will be set at sort of the group level, and those standards are then pushed down to individual site level, right? And so you'll have a person on site who will be potentially wear dual hat, or could just be dedicated to operational technology at that individual site, and they have to therefore report up to group of they've exceeded
Yeah.
X. There could be 150 controls that they might have to meet from a governance standpoint, and so it's making sure that somebody's accountable on the individual site level, and it's not just a policy that's sitting in the cupboard in corporate.
Yeah. And
So
not
yeah,
implemented.
and not implemented. So it should be a regular, whether that's done by the company itself. Obviously, we want to know how frequently are you benchmarking your assets, visiting them,
Okay.
etc. But then also, we'll assist them in that as well by working with some of our third party partners in running those.
Cool. Okay. Rini, any thoughts maybe as we approach the end of the session soon?
No, I think those are all pretty much covered. I mean, and I guess another point to state that, well, it's hard to actually say that, oh, you're in this industry, this is the kind of service, this is the kind of controls you must have. I mean,
Yeah.
there could have been flexibility in certain things, like why do you not have this? So it's not one size fit all kind of solutions. So
Yeah.
it's all customizable, and we just fit to what the client needs or what kind of industry they are in and what are their best practice that they have. Yeah.
Mm. Okay, thank you. I guess that is really interesting and also a lot for us to learn based on the slides. There were a lot of interesting content that you guys shared. So maybe now, since Winnie you shared, maybe Tom, if you would like to give a final closing comment, based on all the complex cases you've seen, or any difference between where you are and also in Asia. Yeah, maybe just a quick sharing of your thoughts, and then I think we can proceed to close off the session soon.
Winnie, do you want to jump to the takeaway? Is this the takeaways?
I'll take it as
Yeah.
a takeaway then.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you start, Winnie, in terms of sort of what you've seen from, and then I can jump in.
I guess we have also mentioned earlier that the key takeaways for this, I guess, regular risk assessment, make sure your systems are up to date. We talk about patching and having your inventory list updated, having robust controls in your security protocols and your standards, and well, incident response planning and preparedness definitely would help the continuous operation of a company in the event of an incident also. But Tom, do you have anything to add on?
Yeah, I would just say, sort of generally speaking, with clients, oftentimes if you don't, historically the cyber policy is a third party liability policy, which was, developed for large data breaches, etc. Then we saw it move into first party risk with ransomware. But oftentimes clients will say, well, I don't have customer data, or I'm comfortable from a data breach standpoint, and so I don't see myself in a cyber insurance policy. And in speaking to them, particularly, when it comes to ransomware and the incident response side, so business interruption, extortion, etc., it's important to just dial into exactly what the client's exposures are for their industry and how they fit into what is a modular cyber policy. So, clients want to speak about, well, if this site is down for X period of time, how much money have I lost? And what is my vulnerability? And how is that covered within a business interruption coverage header of a cyber policy? And then they also want to know sort of, what additional services. So we mentioned some of those sort of on sites, but there's a number of sort of pre-breach services that are available in the market. And it needs to be focused in on, nobody ever expects this to happen, but if it does happen, we're there to bring in cybersecurity experts that, we select them because of their expertise within the operational technology environment, and can kind of come right in and assist the client in handling what's a very painful situation. So I would just say it's sometimes been a challenge in terms of selling clients cyber insurance if they don't view their third-party liability exposure as being very high, but it's obviously crucial transfer of risk for them from a first-party standpoint. So.
Yeah, I think you both are very right on that. I think sometimes getting various stakeholder buy-in, be it internal or external, is something that it is a challenge, even for previous webinars that we've had on also another one, cyber risk in M&A transactions. So that is a point that was common, that sometimes the organizations or maybe various stakeholders at different level, right? Be it people on ground, people right at the top, they may view, having, cyber risk as something different to the extent of it, how serious it is, that impacts the operations of a company, whether it be day to day, that is perceived very differently. And then, it takes a lot to convince, and also probably a lot of numbers, data, regular risk assessments.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay. Well, I guess we have a few minutes left, but I think we are all good for today's session. I will end it here. Our speakers, if you guys are okay. So once again, I'd like to thank Tom and Winnie for dialing in early for Tom, right? And then Winnie closing off the day. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining in the webinar today. Tomorrow, we have one last session, and that will be on the economical and geopolitical landscape, specifically on tariffs. And we have a very special speaker because he will also be dialing in from US. So that will be our final webinar for this series. And once again, to our speakers, thank you so much for this insightful presentation. Yeah. So
thank you.
If anything, thank you. Please feel free to drop off the call, but for attendees, please hold on because I will be sharing the feedback form link now. And
all right,
please.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
guys. Thank you. Okay, if you're still with me on this call, please fill up this feedback form, and it will earn you 1 CPD hour. So it's up now. I'll leave the meeting open until 5:30. Thank you very much.